How's it, Grant here? Welcome back to the channel. And I've been getting a decent amount of requests to revisit the LG V60 cameras. And I figure it's pretty much been a year since the phone has been released. So it's a good time to check up and see how it's performing. Have they made improvements to the cameras? And how does it compare up against some of the best of 2021 with the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra? Now, the V60 doesn't have a fancy periscope zoom lens. It doesn't even have a standard telephoto lens, but it'd be interesting to see how the main wide shooter compares and how the ultra wide angle camera that LG helped pioneer holds up against the S21 Ultra. So if you're new to the channel, I like to show you a lot of photos and videos in both good and low light conditions to help you decide which of these two camera systems might be best for you. And so be sure to check out all the photos and videos. I have some timestamps down below to help you navigate the lengthy video because I want to show you as much footage as possible. And at the end, be sure to leave a comment and let me know which one you thought did better. Do you think the V60 held up well against the S21 Ultra a year after it's been released? And let's go ahead and check out the photos and videos and let me know what you think. Everyone, so here's some video from the rear-facing cameras on the Galaxy S21 Ultra and the LG V60. Starting out at 1080p, 30 frames per second, with the ultra-wide-angle cameras on each. So I'll just pan around to give you a feel for what the color reproduction looks like, the field of view, how much can you fit in the frame compared to each of these ultra-wide-angle cameras, and what that looks like here. And what's nice is you can switch between the cameras while recording. So on the S21, I can switch into the main lens here, and same thing on the LG V60. Except for the transition is a lot smoother on that S21 Ultra than that flash you saw on the V60. But I'll go ahead and pan around here with the main wide-angle cameras to give you a feel for what that looks like here on each phone. At least in the viewfinder, Samsung's really pumping up that sky blue. It's not nearly as blue as it's looking there on the S21 Ultra. The V60, at least in the viewfinder, looks much more true to life as far as colors go. And so as we pan over here to the right, we will test zoom out on that cell tower. So the S21 Ultra has 2 telephoto lenses, so it does have a first 3 times telephoto optical zoom there. And the V60 has a 2 times telephoto zoom. And that's what that looks like compared to each other. And we'll go ahead and move into the 10 times telephoto lens there on the S21 Ultra. And I can zoom all the way up to a max 10 times digital zoom here on the V60. So that's what the V60's digital zoom looks like compared to the S21 Ultra's optical zoom. And I'll go ahead and back out to 1 times here on the V60 and on the S21. And we'll test autofocus here on the post first with the S21 Ultra. So really nice and snappy here as far as autofocus from the S21, even in a bit of shade here, which can be more difficult. Snaps in really quick and refocus really nicely as well. So let's go ahead and test it on the V60. And let's go ahead and see. A little bit more finicky here, but there you go. Autofocus and refocus. And there we go. You just have to get the distance a little bit more accurate before it'll focus. And again, a little bit more finicky one more time. But there you go. And refocus away. Let's try one more time. There you go. So let's test some stabilization here as I walk down the stairs on each at 1080p. So they're both stabilized and it should look really good here as far as stabilization. But do let me know if you see any kind of a difference here as I walk down the path. I'll pull up here and we'll pan up here into the sky and see how it handles the changing afternoon light. Everyone, we're back with the same test in the park, this time at 4K, 30 frames per second. Again, starting with the ultra wide angle lens on each of these phones here. And I'll pan around again so you can kind of see what that looks like here in 4K. See if you can see any kind of color reproduction differences from the 1080p footage that you just saw. But again, in the viewfinder, much more pumped up colors here from Samsung versus the true to life colors I'm seeing here on the V60. But again, we can switch into the main lens. So S21 and LG V60. And I'll pan around here with the main lens to give you a feel for what that looks like here on each phone. And then we'll start panning over here to the right and we'll test zoom again here in 4K. So same deal, you've got 3 times telephoto there from the S21 Ultra. And you got a 2 times telephoto lens there on the V60. And 10 times telephoto here on the S21 Ultra. And full pinch to zoom 10 times digital on the V60. Although that looks a lot more grainy than it did at 1080p on the V60. But still very stable. And so we'll go ahead and back this out to 1 times on each S21 and V60. And we'll test autofocus here on the post. S21 there first, and still nice and snappy focus and refocus here in 4K. Still with a very nice shallow depth of field, nice bokeh or background blur there. And now with the V60, there you go, focused up, refocus. Same thing, so not too bad focus here from the V60, and also a very nice shallow depth of field as well. So let's go ahead and test stabilization here at 4K. And these are both fully stabilized at 4K, so stabilization should be looking very nice as I walk down the stairs and through this path. But let's pull up here again and push up into the sky and see how it handles the changing light and what the exposure looks like here. Everyone, so here's some front-facing video from the S21 Ultra and the LG V60. I'm obviously outdoors, but I'm starting out in some shade to give you an idea for what these cameras look like here in some even lighting. And the V60 has a really tight framing with the stabilization turned on, as you can see, compared to the S21 Ultra. But I'll go ahead and step out into some of the afternoon light here so you can see what that starts to look like with the sun shining down this way on my face. And as I turn this way, it'll be directly behind me now. You can see what that does. In the viewfinder, the V60 is really blowing out that sky, while the S21 is actually trying to retain some kind of color and definition there and exposing properly, at least in the viewfinder from what I can see. I'll start panning around this way so you can see what the changing light does to the picture quality here. As the sun is now directly in front of me, you can see the color is back on both of these pictures here, and there's a little bit more cloud definition on each of the phones, although the Samsung S21 Ultra is definitely looking better to me, at least what I'm seeing through the viewfinder again. So let's go ahead and test stabilization by walking here to give an idea what that looks like here on each of these front-facing cameras. But there's just a quick test in 1080p here on the front-facing cameras on the S21 Ultra and the LG V60. Everyone, so we're back with the same test on the front-facing cameras, this time at 4K, 30 frames per second. Again, starting out with some even light in the shade here to give you a feel for what that looks like in 4K on each of these front cameras. And I'll go ahead again and step into the afternoon sunlight so you can see what that starts to look like here with the sun coming down this direction. But I'll go ahead and pan around so that it's directly behind me again. And still on the V60, it's blowing out that sky, while the S21 Ultra is exposing a lot better there. And we'll pan so you can see what the changing lighting conditions do here in 4K, if you see any difference in the color reproduction or not. And again, you can see how it exposes a lot better this way for the sky and those nice clouds. And we'll go ahead and pan around this way and start walking and conclude this test with some stabilization by walking here. So let me know what you think of the front-facing cameras on the Galaxy S21 Ultra and the LG V60. Hey everyone, so here's a low light video test on the LG V60 and the Galaxy S21 Ultra. I'm starting out with the ultra wide angle lens on each at 1080p 30 frames per second here to give you a feel for what these ultra wide angle lenses look like and how they compare to each other. And we'll go ahead and move into the main lens on each. So LG V60, main lens on the S21 Ultra. Pan around and up into that bright street light to see how they handle really intense light. And at least with the viewfinder, the S21 Ultra is definitely flaring that light out a lot more, and it's been doing that pretty much in every comparison that I've done. And the LG V60 is actually not too bad, really. And we'll go ahead and test a little bit of zoom here. So with the telephoto lenses, 2 times on the V60 telephoto, and we'll go to the 3 times telephoto there on the S21 Ultra. It also has a 10 times telephoto zoom lens on the S21, but we'll back this out to the main lens on each. And we'll go ahead and pan around this way and start walking to test stabilization. Also, in these tests, I like to give you a different lighting situations here. So that was pretty good lighting, obviously, there. And we're going to walk over to a much darker setting, so able to see how these cameras perform in pretty much decent to good light to some pretty difficult lighting here. And as you're around the corner, the viewfinder showing me that the S21 Ultra is definitely brightening up the scene a lot more, and at the expense of a decent amount of noise here, while the V60 is looking a little bit more true to life, but definitely brightening it up just a bit. And I'll go ahead and pan up into the dark night sky. That's pretty dark. And the S21 Ultra, at least in the viewfinder again, brightening that up a little bit more than the V60. And I'll pan around here to the left where there's a little bit more light, but still a pretty dark alleyway here, and give you a feel for what it looks like here in 1080p. Everyone, we're back with the same low light test, this time at 4K, 30 frames per second. But again, starting out with the ultra wide angle lens on each to give you a feel for what it looks like here in 4K. And again, I'll go into the main lens on each. So there we go on the V60 and on the S21 Ultra. And again, we'll go ahead and pan up into that bright street light to see how that looks in 4K. And again, S21 Ultra definitely flaring that out a lot more. And we'll go ahead and pan over here and do our stabilization test, as well as our darker low light setting test to see how these cameras handle that light transition from that brighter area to this much darker area over here. And again, 4K footage is probably looking a little bit darker than it did at full HD 1080p. That's pretty typical. And you can see here we're rounding the corner and it's again much darker. Again, the S21 Ultra, at least with the viewfinder, is definitely brightening that scene up a lot more than the V60 at the expense of a little bit more noise. Panning up into the night sky again, where there's maybe a couple stars out there, and panning over to the left to give you a feel what that looks like here down this darker alleyway. And again, S21 Ultra definitely looking brighter there, so it just depends on how you like to see your low light footage here. And that's just a quick 4K test. Everyone, so here's a low light test from the front facing cameras on the LG V60 and the S21 Ultra. This is at 1080p 30 frames per second, and immediately you can see that the V60 has a much tighter crop with the stabilization on, so it's going to be a little bit tighter, less that you can actually fit into the frame there. But I'll go ahead and pan around so you can kind of see what that looks like with all the lights around me and how the front facing cameras are handling all of that. And actually not too bad there. And obviously this is a pretty well lit area, so it's going to be more of an ideal lighting you're going to see in low light. But we'll go ahead and start walking to test stabilization. And as I usually do, I'll be walking over to a darker area so you can see how it handles that light transition and how it starts looking from this pretty well lit area over to a little bit darker area here. And of course, I'll be walking by this water fountain, which should produce some background noise, so we can see how the audio handles that against the sound of my voice here. And again, it's a little bit darker here, and we'll pan around so you can kind of see what this looks like here with a lot of the bright street lights behind me. All the front-facing cameras handle all of that. Not too bad, some like lens flare, but not really all of that bad. And we'll move over here back into the darker area again, so you can see what that looks like here on each of the front-facing cameras here in 1080p Full HD. Hey everyone, so we're back with the same front-facing camera test and some low light, this time at 4K, 30 frames per second on the front-facing cameras. And again, I'll go ahead and pan around a little bit so you can see, again, how the cameras are handling this, all the lights around me on the sides and those bright street lights behind me in 4K. And then again, we'll go ahead and start walking to test stabilization to see how that looks here. And as you walk over to this darker area, pay attention to how dark the video looks and how that compares to the 1080p footage you just saw. It should look a little bit darker. But again, we'll pass by the fountain, so we'll see how that handles as far as audio and the mics go on each of these phones. And we'll pull up here and pan around one more time so you can see how each of these cameras do in 4K. Actually, there you go, into the bright lights. So again, a little bit of lens flare, not dramatically bad considering how bright those lights are. Other front-facing cameras have handled that a little bit better though. And we'll just end the video right here in this darker area to compare how that looks here. So again, hope you enjoyed all the photos and videos. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you prefer the V60? Has it held up pretty well compared to the horsepower and the cameras that are on the S21 Ultra? So again, let me know in the comments what you thought, and as always, thanks for watching.